Good evening, everybody. I'm Megan Castillo. I'm Town Hall's Community Engagement Manager. On behalf of Town Hall Seattle, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's live stream conversation with disabled activist Alice Wong and author Elsa Sjunneson. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge that our institute stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continued use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. Thank you all for tuning in. Town Hall is proud to be a community-focused organization and a place where we can share and sustain ideas and creativity, even if that means we can't gather in person. I'd like to thank Alice and Elsa for appearing tonight to help make that possible. Town Hall will be continuing to produce virtual content this fall, and many of our past talks are available in video or podcast form on our digital media library. Town Hall is adding new events and podcasts every day. Upcoming programs include Senator Chris Murphy about America and our historical relationship with violence, Ambassador Capricia Marshall about the power of diplomacy, and Michael Sandel with just added Anna DeVere Smith about the myth of mediocrity and more. Town Hall and the nonprofit community at large have been put under significant strain due to the event cancellations and ever-changing landscapes. We hope you will consider extending your generosity to help support us during this difficult time by making a donation or clicking the donate button at the bottom of your screen or becoming a member. You can make a donation online or text Town Hall to 44321 to give. Our partner booksellers have been hit by the negative effects of the COVID outbreak as well and can use your support. If you are interested in supporting local independent bookstores for purchasing a copy of the book being presented tonight, please use the link on this live stream to purchase through Elliott Bay Books. For viewers who want to watch this broadcast with closed captioning, we recommend viewing the stream via our YouTube page, where we have real-time live cart caption, where we also have real-time live cart captions this evening. To enable the captions, click the CC button at the bottom right corner of the video player. The video will be available for rewatching immediately following tonight's broadcast. Tonight's presentation will be about 40 minutes. Followed by Q&A. Alice and Elsa will select questions from those submitted in the Ask a Question field at the bottom center of your screen. You can also vote on which questions will be addressed by clicking the arrow next to the question to upvote it. We cannot guarantee that we will be able to address every question, but we will try to get to as many as possible. Please keep your questions concise and in the form of a question. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Our Civic Series is supported by Real Networks Foundation, True Brown Foundation, KUOW, and Wyncote Foundation Northwest. Finally, Town Hall is a member-supported organization, so I'd like to thank all of our members watching tonight. Elsa Sjunneson is a Hugo and Aurora Award-winning editor who describes herself as a deafblind hurricane in a vintage dress. Her piece, How to Make a Paper Crane from Rage, is included in Disability Visibility. As an author, her work has appeared in CNN Opinion, Tor.com, the Boston Globe, and numerous other venues. In addition to editorial and authorial pursuits, she educates authors on writing disability respectfully. Her debut memoir, Alone in the Light, Seeing Through Ableism, is set to be published in 2021. And we're hoping we'll be able to have Elsa back when Alone in the Light is out. Alice Wong is a disabled activist, media maker, and consultant. She is the founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project, an online community created in 2014 dedicated to creating, sharing, and amplifying disability, media, and culture. In 2017, she launched the Disability Visibility Project and has been one of the leading partners in the #CryptTheVote campaign, a nonpartisan online movement encouraging the political participation of disabled people. She is also a co-partner on disabledwriters.com, a resource to help editors connect with disabled writers and journalists, #CryptLit, a series of Twitter chats for disabled writers with novelist Nicola Griffith, and Access is Love, a campaign that aims to help build a world where accessibility is understood as an act of love instead of a burden or afterthought. She has been published in the New York Times, Vox, Bitch Media, and Teen Vogue, among others. Her collection, Resistance and Hope, Essays by Disabled People, was published in 2018. Wong's book, Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century, is the subject of tonight's talk. Please join me in welcoming Alice Wong and Elsa Sjunneson.
Thank you for this wonderful introduction, Megan. Hey, everyone. It is just a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank everyone at Town Hall Seattle for making this possible, and shout out to Elliott Bay Books. Definitely support your local independent booksellers wherever you are, and your libraries. So I'm delighted to be here, and just want to let you all know that I am here from San Francisco. I've been sheltering in place since March. I've not left my house. And today, of all days, it's been super smoky and a really lovely, scary, dark orange dystopian sky. So this is the environment I am situated in, and I can tell you that this is something that I'm looking forward to, especially today. So, Elsa, first of all, how are you doing? And I'm just delighted to be talking with you, but how have you been since the pandemic?
Well, it's really lovely to see you and to be here. I'm delighted to be speaking in my hometown for the first time since I've moved back. But I have to tell you, writing a memoir in the middle of a pandemic is a challenge. I would not have chosen this particular setting. I'm a science fiction writer by trade, and what's happening right now is much better suited to a dystopian YA novel than it is to what I'm currently doing. But here we are. So, you know, digging through childhood trauma, through all just, you know, part of the process of writing a book about ableism in the 21st century.
Yeah, and in terms of your own writing process, what does it mean to be writing a pandemic where it's, more difficult now to actually have in-person interactions with other writers or other people that you trust? How has that affected your kind of creative and editing process? Because, we're already isolated and separated. While we do have Zoom and other things, for some writers, it's still not exactly comparable. So how has that changed your writing process?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I tend to write in cafes, and I tend to not, so I've been more isolated just because of the fact that I'm writing in my office every day instead of out in the world. But it's also been difficult because I'm going on writing retreats. There's nowhere for me to go and vanish from my real life. I'm just kind of stuck in place, which is where I need to be, but it's also a lot.
Yeah, and I guess can you share a little bit about where you are right now in writing your memoir in terms of like, are you just kind of getting started? Are you right at the middle of it?
No, I'm actually done. It's due in about a month. So I will be handing that over to my editor, and it will go off and come back to me with lots and lots of red lines, and I will fix it. But I have to say, I'm feeling pretty good about where it is right now. I think that it will be a good book. I think it will be a book worth reading. And what I most hope is that fellow deafblind and deafblind women feel like they've been seen, because I talk a lot about what it's really like to exist in a world where we're not seen, where we are often sort of pushed off to the sidelines, or our stories aren't represented because it's not what people want to tell.
Yeah, and I'm really pleased that your title includes the word ableism, because I think that's something that you and I talk about a lot, is basically like the subtext of a lot of what we do, whether it's our activism or our writing. But I'm really delighted to see the word ableism just front and center. And, for a lot of people, especially non-disabled people, this is still a new term for them. So, was it intentional that you wanted to really put that front and center?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again, Alice?
Yeah, was it intentional for you to put the word ableism in the title of your book. You know?
Oh, it was very important to me because I think that ableism is, and I talk about this in the book, it's a toxic force. It is something that surrounds us on a daily basis. We don't get up in the morning without having to, by the time we've gone to bed, deal with ableism at least once in our day. It is consistently there and present, and it's something we don't talk about enough. We don't talk about the fact that it's just always there in the background. And I think in many ways we don't think about it that way because so often what is ableist and harmful to us, some people think of as kind. You know, it's like, oh, you speak so well for a deaf person. You know, the interpreters are twitching while they're interpreting that. But like, I hear that all the time, and it's like, no, that's not actually a compliment. That's mean. You see so well for a blind person. No, that's not a compliment. That's not helpful. So it's that kind of stuff is just low grade there all the time.
Yeah, and speaking of ableism, that's low grade and also pretty explicit. I mean, you and I DM each other every once in a while on Twitter because we react and, have commentary on some of the similar things. And just the other day, I said, as if on you, there was a article about Elon Musk and this brain implant that he's so excited about in terms of just what it's going to do to, eliminate disability in the future. And, you write about science fiction and speculative, thinking about the future. And what are your thoughts about these real world technologies in developments that really don't
So,
in the sense that people are celebrating it, even though it means our erasure?
so in the science fiction world, what Elon Musk is suggesting is a cure narrative. Cure narratives are designed to basically say, oh, look, we can fix disability and it just won't exist in, 50 years because we'll have all of the technological fixes. We'll have all of the, medical changes. We can edit the genome sequence. And you know what? I'm just going to tell everybody out there, it's not realistic. Like, we will never get rid of disability on the whole. It's not going to happen. And the reason why is because human bodies are squishy and weird. They don't do what you want to do. We're also not going to get rid of it because even if, let's say, you were able to fix my eye, I could see. Oh, here's the problem. My brain has completely rewired itself to see out of one eye. So my next question is, do you have the brain implant that will wire my brain to see out of two eyes so that I don't have to relearn how to walk, read, write, go to the bookstore? How's that going to happen? So, these cure narratives, these bright ideas of just changing the human body often don't think through the long-term consequences of changing the human body. And there's also the fact that, in 50 years, sure, we might have a neural net that fixes my PTSD, and that would be great. But would the neural net, what if my brain doesn't want to access the neural net? What if there are disabilities because our bodies don't interface with technology? How do those things change our perceived disability? So I think disability is a constant that we need to deal with. What did you think about that article, Alice?
Oh, well, I mean, I rolled my eyes and I, here we go again. I mean, this is just, part of this really bizarre take on the future, or this kind of like enthusiasm for this better, brighter, shinier world where technology is seen as the thing that's going to fix inequality, right? And seen as going to be this equalizer. But I think historically, we've seen time and time again how technology has widened the gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And again, this other, undercurrents that for this weird utopian vision of the future where everything's going to be better, and yet the idea of what's better is the kind of homogenization of humanity. And we have such amazing variation in the way we move, the way we think, the way we, just exist. And I think that's, we need more of that to be ready for the future. We don't need to flatten our differences. I think that's the other side of the kind of those, the future where maybe we are eliminating parts of us that could actually save us. Just to share with the folks on this event, so I was born with a disability. It is through a genetic mutation. And, I just love the kind of way mutations are framed in popular culture as, a mistake or something that's bad or something that's, junk DNA. And I wonder, just in this push to edit genes, which is happening through techniques like CRISPR, what if we're getting rid of something that we actually need? Because we just don't know. And I feel like this is where you and I and other disabled people that we know, we've been sounding the alarm, we've been the oracles of the modern day world, and yet people just think we're overreacting or just exaggerating. They don't want to see the ableism that's right in front of their face the way white supremacy is. This is just these are all bound up together, and it's really about power.
I really want to sort of nab onto something that you said there, which is that you linked ableism to white supremacy. And I think that it's really important to address that, because as we talk about dismantling white supremacy, we need to sort of engage the fact that ableism is a systemic presence that does support white supremacy. Let's be really honest for a second. Historically, the Nazis actually went after disabled people first. The T4 Action Program was designed to murder disabled people systematically in Poland and in Germany. So this is a part of the white supremacist building block collection, which kind of brings me to the question I wanted to ask you, which is, ableism is systemic. And one of the things that I know makes me angry is how a lot of people are holding that system up using white supremacy, using ableism. And sometimes it's unwitting. Sometimes they don't understand. So I guess what are things that able-bodied people can do to collude with disabled people dismantling the ableist system?
Yeah, I mean, this could be like a 3-hour talk, but I think, very simply, this is just, the bar is low here. I've lowered the bar here. It's this, if you're not disabled and just listening to us right now, just what is this ableism thing? I think the first thing you could do is actually believe disabled people. Would they say something is problematic? Would they say something is ableist? If you don't understand it, I really do recommend people to do the homework, work through, unlearn, all of your kind of implicit biases, because I have them too. Everybody's working through stuff, but we have to kind of at least recognize it, that it exists, and that it does take extra efforts, but it's worth it if you really do want to be a quote-unquote good ally. I use the quotes there because, to be a real ally is to be uncomfortable, to not be defensive, to do the homework before asking disabled people to explain their lives, and also is supporting us in real, tangible ways. Whether that's material supports or other acts of solidarity. So, for example, here we are about a few months before the election. Now, we can think about the person, the two candidates who are running, and we can see that one candidate does not have a platform on disability issues. Another candidate does. Now, whether you're disabled or not, believe it or not, there are people in your lives that are disabled, your friends, your families, your coworkers, your neighbors. Think about the choices you're making and, engage with disability rights and justice as a social justice issue, like as it is a political issue. And I think, the cliche that personal is political is very real because so many of us are just fighting for our lives right now. And I'm not just saying disabled people, but in this moment, Black, brown, indigenous people, we're all fighting for our lives right now. I think, it's been a real convergence of so many terrifying things that we've been, this is way before 2016, but we've been under so much that, we need solidarity, we need action, and we need people to kind of understand that we can't go back to normal. We can't settle for, what we have in front of us.
I think the other thing that I hope able-bodied people take away from this is going back to some of what you were saying. If you don't have any disabled friends, if you don't think you have any disabled family members, if you're racking your brain to think about any disabled people that you know, I highly recommend that you go and make some friends and expand your community, because the fact of the matter is, if you don't have disabled friends, you are actually participating in a social way. Because I talk to a lot of people who will sometimes say, oh, you're the first deafblind person I've ever met, or you're the first blind person I've ever met. And I'm like, where did you go to school that there were no disabled kids? And of course, the answer is that a lot of public schools are segregated, and there are a lot of students been segregated into special education classrooms and out of the mainstream classroom. But if you don't have disabled friends, if you never had to deal with tax violation at a restaurant because you don't go out to restaurants, well, none of us are going out to restaurants right now, but in the before times, the point is, you don't have a perspective into that world, and you need it because it's necessary.
And I would also say, just the reason why we're gathered today, another great thing to do is to buy my book and read. I mean, this is, if you want to, really broaden your mind, these are 37 first-person stories by disabled people who are really just not there to inspire you. They're not there to teach you a very special after-school lesson. These are disabled people who are powerful. They have things to say. They're living their lives. And they're not apologetic about it. So, that's another reason why, this book was created is, first of all, it's really for us, by us. That's really the number one goal for me, is to please the other disabled people, to please myself as an editor, but also really for our people. But, this was made in the spirit of inviting everybody in. So it really is my intention to have something that captures the zeitgeist of this is the 21st century, and here are some stories. This is not definitive, this is not a 101 basic thing, but these are some very amazing people that I think people should know about. And I think this could be a great kind of entry point for a lot of people who are wanting to learn. They want to dig a little deeper. And for anybody that does have the book, in the back there's an entire reading list for even more writers. And I think one thing that's maybe Elsa, you and I both experienced is that we hear time and time again from editors or publications that say, "Oh, it's so hard finding disabled writers to cover this and that." So I'm just like, obviously you're not doing it right because we are out there. You're just not doing the work to engage with us. And there's just right now, I feel maybe every generation feels this way, but I feel like we are just right now there's such abundance of disabled creative people. And I don't know, that's the one thing I'm kind of hopeful for. How do you feel about that, Elton?
I feel great about it. It's actually funny. I wanted to ask you about how on earth you picked the list of people for the anthology that you did, because there really is such an incredible wealth of disabled talent out there. There's so many people who I know who are writing. And how did you select these essays? Because I was incredibly honored to be asked. And also, like, it's an incredible company for me to be a part of. So I'd love to know sort of what your process was like for deciding what was going to be in the anthology.
Yeah, thanks for asking. And this is, the real challenge of being an editor, because it is a huge privilege, right? This is, kind of your vision for the overall framework of the book. Like every piece I choose was intentional. I would love to have included more people, but because of the work of the 37 contributors are in this anthology. And I actually think, having a tighter, more cohesive collection is even better, because these are, in my mind, some of the best. And, a lot of factors went into this. So all of these were pieces either published or written just specifically for this anthology from the year 2000 forward. So I wanted something that was very recent, that reflected the times that we live in. And also I wanted to bring in into play people who are not well known, like just, people that aren't the big names that we think about, or the ones that are most recognized in public as disabled folks. And, that was intentional as well. And clearly, as a disabled woman of color, one of the things that's my personal commitment and my, personal mission is to really smash the ideas of the prevailing representation of disability as overwhelmingly white. And I just want to, shout out to my friend Vanessa Thompson, who created a hashtag called Disability to White, because, if you look at what gets published, if you look at television shows, pop culture, movies, every form of literature or culture, most of the representation is pretty white, cisgender, heteronormative stuff. And it's not the reality that I see. It's not what excites me. And there's just so much beauty out there. There's just such abundance. And I know that I use that word already, but the word, that really is what I believe.
I think one of the things that's interesting about the media representation that you're talking about is that a lot of the people of color who are disabled in movies and TV often fall into the trope of villains, which is part of the bigger problem. Like, it tends to be the big, scary disabled person who also happens to be a person of color. So we then start falling into this intersection of both racism and ableism coming together and making things even worse. And I find that these intersection points are also a big deal, and you definitely touch on a lot of them within the anthology, because you do have queer disabled people, you do have Jewish disabled people. We may not be necessarily writing about those intersections within the text, but if you come and find us, you end up discovering more about those lives outside of the text than you would otherwise.
Yeah, and I love the bios at the back because I feel like people are writing about all kinds of things, right? Like their activism, their work, their personal lives, but really, if you want to get a real sense of the diversity of the contributors, you just read their bios. It's just like there's such richness out there. And, I did it in a way that wasn't like, it wasn't tokenizing because it's really about excellence, and then there's excellence everywhere. And that to me was the real kind of subtext throughout the book. If there is such a, hidden agenda, it's really, well, look at all the excellence that's out there and think about all the excellence that is yet to be discovered. And I think that's, I want more stuff like this. I think it's just, way, way overdue. I gotta say, I am, especially this year, but definitely it's been a culmination of work by activists for years. But I am here for all the reckoning that's happening across various industries, in particular the publishing industry. And, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what kind of systemic changes that you want to see, in particular for disabled writers and editors, because you're an editor as well.
I sure am, and I sure have a challenge for the New York publishing industry. Like, COVID-19 has proved something that disabled people have always known. And what we have always known is that it is entirely possible to work from home and have it be an effective thing to do. Now, New York publishers have insisted for decades that the only place that you can be an editor, the only place that you can be a writer is in New York. That's a lie. It's entirely possible for someone to edit books and so not live in New York City. In fact, most of the New York City editors I know are currently editing out of Brooklyn in their apartments. So the biggest challenge that I have for the publishing industry is actually to decentralize, to really consider opening up the borders of where you can live in order to work in the industry. Because I would love to be working in publishing. I would love to be working somewhere editing books or working at a publishing house doing sensitivity reads full time or doing something that was a part of that industry. But I don't want to move back to New York. It was exhausting and tiring, and I felt isolated, and I don't want to live there again. I like being in Seattle. I like being home. So I would love to be editing from this side of the country. And I think that that's across the board something that could really enable the publishing industry to diversify, because people of color can't always they're not getting paid, but white editors get paid either. The pay isn't the same. So also start paying disabled authors and people of color the money that they deserve. Just across the board, we need to make change to make diversity actually happen in publishing.
Yeah, and I want to also speak to like this actual event that we're in right now, because earlier this year, before the book launch, before the pandemic, I was incredibly nervous about like, how am I gonna promote a book as a disabled person that does not fly? I think the conventional wisdom was, you must promote, you must promote, you must, go to libraries, you must go to conferences, you must make media appearances wherever they are. And, I felt like I was at a huge disadvantage. And I think this is something that's disabled people have been fighting for in terms of being in conferences, through accessible means, because it is a travel privilege is a real thing. It's not just financial, but it's also about accessibility. And I really do hope that with if organizations like Town Hall Seattle and across the country, just all these cultural institutions like libraries and museums who have all shifted toward online events. I please hope they consider continuing these after the pandemic because, I would have never had the opportunity to be here with you all at Town Hall Seattle if it wasn't for this option. And I have to, I have to presume that if I made a request, you know, if pandemic didn't happen, I bet you anything I would have felt that's a lot of resistance by these major organizations that say, oh, you know what? We really love the in-person live experience. There's just nothing that compared to it. Or we don't have the infrastructure right now to do this. And yet, look what happened. Because everybody was affected, because non-disabled people had something taken away from them. Suddenly, all these things that disabled people have been left out of and trying so hard to advocate suddenly appeared. So that to me is a bit of a bittersweet moment about other surrealness that's happening right now.
Yeah. And just hearing the "you try so hard" makes me full body flinch. It's such a button push. We sort of talked about this before, but yeah, my piece is kind of about rage. And when we were prepping for this, we did kind of talk a little bit about the rage thing. So I thought we might want to share our various lists this evening. See, as I'm going to make a Hamilton reference for a second, which is that it's a very long list. I have an itemized list of disappointments. So we're going to start with one that's close to home because I think it's actually important to talk about, which is that the Seattle Police Department threw a tear gas canister underneath the chair of a wheelchair user who was on the front line at the Western Barricade back in June of 2020. And that would be bad enough, honestly. Like, everybody just take a second. They knew that the wheelchair user was there. They threw the canister anyway. The wheelchair user could not get out quickly enough because there were hundreds of people behind them. Like, let's talk about front of the line safety. But also now the East Precinct has done my favorite thing, which is that there is a wall around the precinct which closes off the sidewalk from middle of the block on 12th to middle of the block on Pine. And that means that there are 2 curb cuts that have been blocked for access on one intersection, and that's not okay. And I wanted to bring that up in front of the Seattle audience because accessibility matters. And blind people with guide dogs who can't see won't know that that street is blocked off until their dog says, turn around, at which point you'd end up trying to go into the street because usually if the street's blocked off, it's because there's a pedestrian pathway that takes you past some cars. It doesn't exist there. But, while we're at it, let's also add healthcare. There's a whole list of things that disabled people are angry about right now. Definitely leaving healthcare on the table, though, because healthcare is still in peril for disabled people. We are still being put on, questionable lists about whether or not we'll get treatment if we get COVID-19. How do I pick just one, Alice? How about you?
Yeah, I think just like to add to your list, just ditto on everything you said. did I think one of the two things that make me really ragey, and just only two, because we have a Q&A next, but I would say number one related to the virus and this pandemic is clearly this, again, ableist and eugenic rhetoric that, supposedly at the very beginning, don't worry, the only people that are affected are the high risk, vulnerable people. Everybody else, don't worry about it. It's like a bad flu. And, most people are like, okay, whatever. It's just like those people. Those people are our people. And that our people, many of the time, the fact that we're disposable is because we're not seen. I am so amazed by the fact that congregate settings, places like prisons, detention centers, nursing homes, psychiatric hospitals, these are the major outbreaks, and where people are dying and being affected, but they're out of sight and out of mind. So, like, people don't really give a shit, right? And I think that also speaks to the broken systems that maybe we should just, not have prisons anymore. Maybe we don't need to put people in nursing homes just because they have high care needs. Who would have thought? So the other raging thing, I think, getting back to politics, is here we are 30 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there are still considerable barriers to voting. You know, absentee voting is, advocate, is being promoted as a safer, accessible way for people to vote. And yet, as you and I know, there are many people with disabilities that cannot use absentee voting because, they cannot vote in a private and independent manner because of absentee voting. And on the flip side, you know, is it safe? What kind of precautions are being taken for people who have no choice but to go in person to a polling place? And there's still a lot of polling places out there that are physically inaccessible. And there's still a lot of poll workers that are not trained about accessible technology or voting accessibility. So even if you're a disabled voter, when you get to a polling place and get into the door, you can still be screwed. And that to me is a major, form of voter suppression, technological accessibility.
One of the biggest things that I think people don't know about the ADA is that places of worship are exempt from having to be accessible as a building. And there are a lot of polling places, especially in the South, that are voting spaces. So if you vote in a church and that church has decided it doesn't want to be accessible, you can't sue them. They aren't legally required to be, and it actually just blocks you from actually getting to vote. So this is one of those things that happen. And there's a list of others in which spaces can be inaccessible and still legal. So that's one thing I recommend to everybody, is to really look into what loopholes are in the ADA, because we need to plug them.
And before we start with the Q&A with Megan, Elsa, you mentioned that you have a party trick. So, like,
Yes.
would you like to introduce your party trick?
Okay, so I'm a science fiction writer, and in science fiction and fantasy, what we do is we have to build entire worlds. Our job is to make a place that feels seamless, that feels like you could live in it. We get to make rules. So let's do a little bit of world building today, Alice, because I think that it opens up an opportunity to imagine the world in a way that it may not be otherwise. So, for example, one way in which, if we changed it just a little bit, this world could be more accessible than it is right now, would be that ASL is taught in every single public school. If ASL is taught in every single public school in the United States, what happens is that when I go into the grocery store and I can't hear through a plexiglass wall and somebody wearing a mask, so I also can't read their lips, I actually have access to them instead of having to shout through the thing, hello, can you tell me a little bit louder how much my purchase is? Or for that matter, just, no, I don't need a paper bag. Yeah, it would make things easier. Or even just having a whiteboard behind the counter would make things easier. Although for me, that's not so much because I can't see more than about 3 feet ahead of me at any time for reading purposes. So Alice, what's a way that we could potentially world build, just even a tiny shift that could make the world a different place?
Well, as somebody who relies on other humans for personal care, assistance with my daily needs, like, without a human being, I would not be able to get out of bed. I would not be able to take a shower. So I would like to see a world centered on care. A world centered on interdependence. A world where people are enough as they are. That it's not a weakness to ask for help. It's actually maybe an honor to give help. Something that's valued in our society. Wouldn't that be something? I love this idea of, well, I want to live in a world. I feel like I'm trying to work toward a world where people aren't institutionalized just because they care. I want to live in a world where communities take care of each other. It's not something that's solely the responsibility of the states. And the fact that disabled people don't need to live at or in poverty just because we rely on the states to live. I think that's the kind of world that I want to be in, and that's what is a small part of what I think liberation and justice looks like, where everybody's the way they are, they're accepted as they are, and that they don't, they're perfect as they are. Wouldn't that be something?
It would be, I think there's something that even could come out of that is what happens when we change our beauty standards. What happens when a cataract isn't immediately something to stare at or to have a child freak out because they think it belongs to an evil witch? What if our storytelling didn't have these places where disability codes for evil to the point where you don't get looked at on the street like you are? Because I'm betting you get Darth Vader comments a lot, Alice. So what if that weren't a thing that happened because we weren't using disabled bodies as shorthand for evil? What if that was a part of our world?
And Darth is misunderstood. Darth is misunderstood. So that's all I'm going to say. Well, let's bring in Megan, who's going to moderate our Q&A, and just know we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to Q&A. Ah, there she is.
Oh, we can't hear you, Megan.
Megan, you're muted.
Hi, sorry, Megan. I'm not able to unmute you for some reason. Hi, everyone. This is Josh from Town Hall, just here in the background.
Maybe if you want to chat the questions, maybe 1 or 2 questions, we can read them aloud. It's up to you if you want to do that.
Yeah, let me just see. Megan, I'm just gonna try inviting you back in. Yeah, it'll be really quick, 1 sec.
Hi, everybody.
Yay!
Yay. Okay, cool. Let's go to questions. All right, I am going to start at the top. So, folks who've upvoted questions, we're going to start at the top. So, our first one is from Mindy. Mindy asks, I'm a writer and a mom of a disabled child. I'm nervous about writing characters who are disabled because there have been parent authors who have done that before in problematic ways. How can able authors best write disabled characters? Or should they?
Mm-hmm. Also, why don't you take this? Because I think you have a great answer, I'm sure.
Sure. So I think that able-bodied authors should write disabled characters. And some of that is because I think it's important for authors to stretch their empathy. And that means, look, I'm a disabled writer, but I write able-bodied people all the time. I have to learn. So you do need to learn, but you need tools. So use sensitivity readers. Make sure that you are hiring people to help you shape your work into the most accurate and empathetic that it can be. Try not to tell stories that aren't yours to tell. For example, tell a story that's got a main character who's disabled. If it's about disability, tell stories that include disabled characters that aren't about their disability as the central narrative point or narrative tension. Try not to create stories that are about cure narratives, because a lot of the time I see able-bodied people assume that we want cures and therefore that's the stories we want to read. And then it's like, no, I actually didn't want that, but now I'm annoyed. Alice, what do you think?
Yeah, and I feel like, Betty, thank you so much for asking a big, really, really trying to say about your place as a parent, because, not every parent is going to be one of those types that's, misrepresents or overly, represents what disability is. We need great parents. We need parents who get it. And I would recommend that you also, connect with other disabled writers. There's just a huge community of people. And I think, becoming involved, reading their work, letting that inform you on how you can write. Not to say you have to mirror it, but just getting the whole diversity of disabled experiences. Because there are just so many types. And even within, let's say, one type of disability, like cystic fibrosis or something, there's a multitude of experiences. So just be very mindful of that. And just do your research. But I think, becoming engaged and involved with other disabled writers, especially let's say you're into YA or, science fiction or something else, there are disabled writers in every genre, like romance or mystery. So find those folks and, join groups, join like, reading groups or join, writing groups. And just, the more interactions and, the more kind of sharing you do, I think the better your work will be informed.
I think the other thing I want to say real quick is that I find a lot of parents, and I don't know if you do this or not, so don't get the wrong way, but a lot of parents tend to feel like they can speak to the disability that their child has as an expert. And that's such a dangerous thing to do. So definitely, as you write, try not to lean on your experience as a parent, but on learning from disabled experiences, because those are very different.
Excellent. Thank you both for that. Thank you, Mindy, for the question, and thank you both for such good, thoughtful responses. Okay, our next question is from Catherine, and she asks, what is your vision for disability justice in school?
Well, I think one of the first things is that disabled people's behaviors are not criminalized. That's not what was, as instead, discipline or surveil disabled students. I've seen some reports about clearly violence and abuse does happen in classrooms. And there was, certain schools who said, oh, we'll just put cameras in special education classrooms. Would that be, the answer? No, it's not. Well, I think the real idea of disability justice is clearly, just breaking up, dismantling the student prison pipeline, but also just diversify the way people are taught, right? And I think that's a big deal. Like that's, you gotta find ways that are creative and accessible and, I don't like to use this word all the time, but inclusive, right? I think that's still is a very kind of rigid way, supposedly that people are supposed to learn and think. And as we realize with disabled people, there's such a vast ways of communicating and learning that really reach all students. So I think that would be my take on that.
Hire disabled teachers, teach disabled books, teach disabled history. Don't erase Helen Keller's legacy as a woman who helped found the ACLU and reduce her only to the experience of learning how to sign out of another person's hand. Don't diminish disabled experiences in the history books because they do exist and they do matter. I didn't have a classmate who was disabled until I was in college. Don't continue to segregate students who are disabled from each other. Try to create experiences that allow students with disabilities to experience play together and make sure that their able-bodied classmates also have those experiences. Teach ASL in classrooms other than when you want to have a really cute Christmas Carol special where everybody signs Jingle Bells. It's just, we need to be included in the educational experience outside of reading a Helen Keller book when we're in the second grade, or watching The Miracle Worker, by the way, is a terrible play when it comes to disability representation. So just stop teaching what we've been teaching for 50 years and update it to be something that is real and radical and actually includes disabled voices.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. That's so well put. All right, our next one is from Ellen. So Ellen asks, how can I help other disabled people to get their voices counted since, yes, access is limited? Help transport to polling places, pick up absentee votes if the person can't leave home. Are there organizations doing this now? And they say based in Seattle.
So since I'm in Seattle, I will address that, which is to say I don't know if there's a group doing that now, but there should be a group that's taking absentee ballots to polling boxes. However, I don't know if it's legal to drop off somebody else's ballot at a ballot box. So I'm going to do something a little unorthodox, which is to say, if you are currently organizing something like that, let me know because I want to volunteer. But also, if there isn't something like that happening, I will figure out a way to organize it because we need to know that it is legal and that people's votes get counted. I just gave myself a job, didn't I, Alice?
Yeah, that's what you did.
Well, Ellen's going to help you.
Yeah, and also I think look towards your mutual aid groups.
Yeah.
Many communities have mutual aid collectives, and I feel like that could be a place where you can find other like-minded people to organize and along with Elsa, but also, each state as a protection and advocacy agency that's tasked with, making sure voting is accessible. I think it'd be a resource in terms of, legal questions and like digital assistance. So there's one in Washington called Disability Rights Washington. So check them out as a resource if you do have questions and want to organize. I think might not be organized on the ground, but at least they may be able to point you in the right direction.
Awesome. All right. We're at the 1 hour mark. So do we feel like doing maybe one more question or how are we feeling?
Well,
Great.
interpreters don't mind. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Okay. So we'll call this our last one. It's from Karen, who is our friend over at Elliott Bay Books. So hi, Karen. And Karen asks, what are the stories you are longing to read right now? And Karen also says, what a great anthology. One of the best anthologies I've ever read.
Oh, Jared, thank you so much. It still feels really good to hear this because it feels like there's so much uncertainty in terms of I did not know if how it would be received, and I just feel like right now there is a hunger out there. I think there is a need for books like this, and I think we need all the joy and celebration we can get. And this really is a source of joy. At least it is for me personally, and I hope it is for our readers. But I think that we just need so many more folks who are multiply marginalized to be at the forefront, getting the book deals, getting, a show on Netflix, everything. I want to see all kinds of people, especially, disabled people of color front and center because for so long it's just been like the bar is so low in terms of expectations. Like, we think, oh, readers, they can't handle, like, too much, or that we think, oh, moviegoers or TV audiences, they can't wrap their minds around, you know, ultimately, people who represent and come from multiple communities. And that's simply not the case. I think we just underestimate who we consider the public all the time. So I hope that answered your question. I don't know if I did.
I think that was great. Elsa, do you have any stories that you're longing to read right now? That was Karen's question.
I really wish that there were any fiction about deafblind women at all that existed that I didn't have to write myself. I grew up without any representation. There was one book about a blind boy in the school library, and he got a guide dog and got his eyes out with some fireworks. It's called Follow My Leader. But that was the only book, aside from a nonfiction book about Helen Keller, that I had that was about another blind kid. And I wouldn't read anything about deaf children at all. I can't actually remember anything. So the representation that I got was almost nothing. So I particularly want to see disabled representation in YA, but I also just want to see it across the board. I'm writing my own blind knight story because I have to, but I'd like to be not the only person doing it. I'd like to see things that I feel I'm reflected in out there in the world. So, I'm looking for it. It should exist at some point.
Agreed. All right. Thank you so much both for your reflections and sharing. And I just really want to encourage everyone in our audience to grab a copy of the book from Elliott Bay. That blue button at the bottom will take you there. Is there anything you want to leave our audience with, Alice and Elsa, before we say goodnight?
Just thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like this is just a continuation of a longer, more difficult, more broad conversation. And I encourage all of you to start having conversations with your friends and loved ones and say, hey, I read this book on disability, visibility. It gave me some thoughts. Let's talk about it. I really do have this sparse conversations and reflection with everyone.
And please, we're going to get political for a second. Please vote for the candidate who has a disability platform in November, please. It would be really good for all disabled people. And also find the disability community on Twitter. We do exist. It is entirely worth your time to learn from us and to experience what conversations we have. It may not always be comfortable. it may actually be uncomfortable about 80% of the time, but you will learn things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I think it's important for able-bodied people to expose themselves to those narratives and to listen. Thank you so much for having me, and this was an incredible honor to talk to you, Alice.
Oh, thank you, Elsa. I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you to our interpreters and our cart coordinator as well, giving us captions tonight. And thank you to everyone in our audience. Thank you to Elliott Bay. Please get a copy of the book. Order a couple for your friends. You can do different shipping addresses, a couple different purchases. I absolutely love it. Follow both of these people on Twitter and have a great night. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Good night. Good night.